President Clinton recently said that a bill he signed back in 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act, or Doma as we know it, is unconstitutional. Since Doma was signed into effect, same-sex marriages are not recognized out of the states in which they were granted. And soon the Supreme Court will be deciding whether or not to repeal Doma. Joining us to discuss how this will affect their parents, themselves, and their children and society at large, we have Ella Robinson, daughter of an openly gay bishop and the co-chair of Family Equality Council's The Outspoken Generation Initiative in New York, New York. Sean Carlson, he's with the Family Equality Council in Washington, D.C., and Reverend Dr. Cindi Love, Executive Director of Soulforce in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, everyone. Reverend Dr. Cindi Love, we love having you as a HuffPost blogger. Thank you so much for all your contributions, not just on the blog, but in life. One of the things that Clinton said was that it was a different time. How was it so different? Because I know that today, if something like the Doma Act were to be introduced, people would be outraged.
Well, I think what's happened in society is we've seen this sort of acceleration over the last 6 years of work that really began more than 40 years ago to achieve equal protection under the law for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. And it's sort of like adoption of the internet. You know, at the beginning, no one really knew what the internet was and no one cared except geeks like me and a few others. But then as the critical mass assembled itself, we began to see people saying, well, how can we live without the internet? And now we really don't know how we could live without it. The same thing is going to happen in this case. This is really not about marriage. This is about our democratic values that all of us are entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And I think our nation and the world watching us have now arrived at that critical mass place, and they're just saying, this is ridiculous. This has to stop.
We have a comment here from one of our wonderful community members, I'm Dropping Dimes. The fact that this debate exists in a country that pushes for equality is particularly shameful.
I think one of the most difficult things that I experience,
particularly here in my home state of Texas, is when a spouse passes away and the family of the person who has died feels justified by our laws to deny access both to the funeral, to the visitation, to the entire process involving the departure of the person they love.
And I've actually had people say to me as a pastor, well, the law says we don't have to do anything because they're not really married.
And it's one that is an emotional strife. It's an issue that is not just emotional, but Reverend Dr. Love, it's also one of financial. Not only are you not allowed to go to the visitation, but also many times widows' benefits are not allowed, resulting in the loss of not just millions of dollars of benefits, but also estate tax relief and all kinds of issues.
Exactly.
And even in a more personal level, the items within their homes that have belonged to them together, their china, their pictures, their things that are precious to them, that then people feel justified because of their lack of status in simply removing, often without any consideration of the person left behind.
Excited about your impending nuptials. Reverend Dr. Love, what he's talking about is a tremendous issue that shapes an individual's life. Before, like when I just decided to get married, I was just like, I'll just get married. I didn't have to think about all the hoops that would be jumped. And especially when he started talking about how it's especially traumatic for LGBT families in the South, I couldn't help but think of you. You are in Texas, and you refer to as one of the most conservative parts of Texas possible.
Well, the third most conservative city in America, the LA Times says, so if they're right.
And I was just thinking when he was talking about that of several situations I've seen recently, I was just in Austin last week to lobby for a change in the language on the adoption certificates, the birth certificates that are issued by the state, because in Texas, if a same-sex couple has adopted a child, only one of their names can appear on the birth certificate. So when you go to school to register your child, you go to get immunizations, you go get a passport to travel, all the things that are normal family experiences, you hit a barrier automatically. One of the worst I ever saw was actually children coming in from Hurricane Katrina into Dallas area after the storm, and two dads bringing their two legally adopted children with them in a car with another family stopped in Texas because it was two guys with two young female children. The children were actually removed from them, taken by CPS. It took days to get them back because they couldn't produce the appropriate documents. So Sean is absolutely right. This is just one step. But what is real is there's a tipping point in society around these types of policies and practices. And we can't move to the greater arc of justice on all of these issues until we get rid of this one piece of legislation that fundamentally denies life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to every citizen.
We have a lot of commenters who agree with that sentiment. David Mark Lane says, history shows us that we eventually stumble towards a more perfect union, 3 steps backward, 1 step forward, which the 1 step would certainly be if DOMA is repealed.
Me? Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Let's talk about this offline, and you can join Reverend Dr. Love in spreading her message of knowledge and awareness to everyone in the world. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, everyone.
Thank you.
And fingers crossed for no more DOMA, and thank you all for watching. Please keep watching and checking out what's coming up next in our green rooms, because the conversation always continues here at HuffPost Live.